Welcome to the Dream Novel channel. Before starting to listen to the fun in this clip, don't forget to like and comment, so that the admin will have the encouragement to continue making clips. Let's go listen. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 201, The Interrupted Match. On Saturday, the Quidditch match was finally about to begin. The first game would pit Slytherin against Ravenclaw. As the Slytherin team strode into the stadium, loud cheers erupted from the far-right table, as though their supporters were already celebrating a win. Even the players themselves looked relaxed, showing not the slightest hint of pre-match nerves. To them, last season's game against Ravenclaw, where they'd shut them out, had been nothing more than a practice round for the other teams. Winning today seemed inevitable. What could possibly go wrong? Marcus had even started rehearsing a victory dance with his teammates. He swayed clumsily in the center of the hall, resembling a baboon under the effects of an elixir to induce euphoria. "Don't let it get to you, Cho," Cedric reassured the girl beside him. "Believe me, you're not weak." Cho gave him a look but said nothing. She knew Cedric meant well, yet hearing him say things like that always felt a bit off. It was like a straight-A student telling someone who'd flunked a test that they weren't unintelligent, just that the questions had been particularly tough. However well-intentioned, it made her want to punch him. "To be honest, your chasers are really just average," Kyle said suddenly. "So the key to this game is you. You have to catch the golden snitch before Ravenclaw falls 150 points behind." "I'll try my best," Cho sighed. She knew it all too well, but the golden snitch wasn't like Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. She couldn't just catch it whenever she felt like it. "Kyle's right," Cedric nodded. "And there's also the issue of your broom, it's too old. Even if you spot the snitch first, you'll still be at a disadvantage. If you don't mind, I could lend you my..." He was cut off by a large group of owls that swooped in, their flapping wings and hoots drowning out the rest of his sentence. Kyle noticed that 6 long-eared owls were carrying an elongated package, which they deposited right in front of Cho. Could it be? Cho's heart skipped a beat. She reached out, her hand trembling, to touch the package. "You guessed right, it's a broomstick. I remember those owls, they're the same ones that brought Cedric's broom last time," Kyle said, smiling. "Why don't we open it and have a look?" "But I've never bought a broom before," Cho said nervously. "I wanted to get a Nimbus 1700, but I was still a few galleons short. What if it's for someone else? Maybe the owls just made a mistake." "No way," Kyle shook his head, chuckling. "Owls don't make mistakes that basic." Just then, another owl flew over, dropping a letter onto the package. Cho anxiously tore it open. "This is your new broomstick, a Nimbus 2000. Have fun at the match. Professor Flitwick." Cho's face lit up as she read the note. She handed it to Kyle, who was already eagerly unwrapping the package. Sure enough, inside lay a gleaming new Nimbus 2000. Forgetting all about dinner, Cho grabbed the broom and bolted toward the Quidditch pitch, with the other Ravenclaw team members hurrying after her. After Cho left, Kyle and Cedric returned to the Hufflepuff table. Kyle looked down at the letter in his hands and shook his head, smiling. It seemed Professor Flitwick had been a bit rattled by the last match, deciding to equip Cho with a new broom to avoid another shutout. Back at the Hufflepuff table, Kyle handed the letter to Cedric again and asked, "By the way, what were you about to say?" "Oh, nothing," Cedric replied, shaking his head. He had intended to offer Cho his own broom, but clearly, that was no longer needed. As he glanced at the letter, his eyes drifted toward the Slytherin table. By now, everyone had noticed Cho's new broomstick, and the Slytherins were no exception. The cheering had stopped, Marcus had quit his dance, and the entire team was looking rather grim. The game had barely begun when excitement filled the air. The stands were packed, with Kyle and Cedric front and center, holding up a banner and cheering loudly for Cho. Slytherin seemed determined to get their score past the crucial 150-point mark and went on the offensive right from the start. Marcus flew recklessly, ramming into one of Ravenclaw's chasers and knocking him off his broom. Madam Hooch's whistle blared through the stadium, ruling the play invalid and awarding a penalty to Ravenclaw. Roger Davies, undeterred, remounted his broom and, with a fierce throw, sent the quaffle straight through Slytherin's goalposts. Instead of gaining the lead, Slytherin had lost 10 points, which only seemed to make Marcus angrier. The match was intense, with both teams scoring back and forth. Despite their goals, Slytherin couldn't build the lead they'd hoped for. After their previous shutout, Ravenclaw had undergone rigorous training, toughening their resolve and significantly boosting their skill. This, combined with Cho's new broom, filled Ravenclaw with hope and determination. Whenever Slytherin scored, Ravenclaw quickly matched, keeping the score close. Although Slytherin's superior broomsticks gave them a slight edge, they were only 30 points ahead, nowhere near the 150 points they needed. Spectators speculated about the game's outcome, their excitement growing, when Professor McGonagall unexpectedly arrived at the pitch. Amplifying her voice with her wand, she commanded, "The game is suspended." Everyone returned to the castle immediately. Other professors soon joined her. Many in the stands were confused, but the prefects and professors began guiding everyone away. The Quidditch players hovered uncertainly in mid-air, looking down at the scene below, unsure of what was happening. Everyone, without delay, follow the professors and prefects away from the Quidditch pitch. Professor McGonagall repeated firmly. "We were about to win." Marcus complained bitterly, frustrated by the interruption. He had just managed to score a few more goals, but the scoreboard hadn't registered them. "If you'd like to remain here indefinitely, that's entirely up to you." Snape's cold voice cut in as he appeared beside Professor McGonagall. Marcus looked at Snape and thought better of protesting. He quickly dismounted, his head bowed, and followed the others off the pitch. The exit passage was enchanted to accommodate any number of people without feeling crowded, and under the professor's guidance, it only took minutes to clear the pitch entirely. As they made their way back to the castle, they spotted Professor Flitwick on patrol, his wand drawn, carefully scanning the grounds. A tense silence spread through the crowd as the urgency of the situation began to sink in. A sense of unease grew, and many found themselves unconsciously quickening their pace. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 202, The Dark Wizard in the Forbidden Forest. Professor Flitwick looked unusually serious, his tension so palpable that it seemed as if an out-of-control dragon might appear at any moment. Some older students approached him to ask what was happening, but he remained tight-lipped, urging everyone to return to the castle quickly. As the students moved back toward the castle, whispers filled the air. Most speculated that the source of trouble had something to do with Professor Quirrell, the defense against the dark arts teacher. "It must be him," declared Gemma Farley with conviction. "Nearly every major incident at Hogwarts has something to do with the defense against the dark arts professor. And Quirrell didn't even show up to watch the match today," someone added. "Last time, he said he loved Quidditch, so it's strange he wasn't there." "Do you think Professor Quirrell might be like that dark wizard, Orin, who was here last year?" someone asked nervously. "Or maybe he's a Death Eater." "Stop it, you're giving me the chills." "Let's hurry back to the castle," said another, trying to reassure the group. "Professor Dumbledore's there, so even if it is a Death Eater, we're safe." With that thought, the young wizards felt somewhat comforted as they crowded into the castle. Kyle was also in the crowd, but instead of heading back to the common room, he slipped away from Professor Sprout's sight and moved closer to the Gryffindor team. "Kyle." Fred and George noticed him instantly, eyes lighting up with excitement. "Do you know something?" George whispered. "If you've got a plan, don't forget to include Fred and me." "Sorry, Fred, George." Kyle replied in a low voice as they climbed the stairs. "I need to check on something right now. Could you cover for me?" The twins frowned, curious about Kyle's intentions but didn't hesitate. They positioned themselves on either side of him, stretching their shoulders just enough to shield him from view. "Thanks," Kyle whispered. He bent down, cast the disillusionment charm on himself, and slipped quietly out of the group on the third floor. By Merlin's beard, that was the disillusionment charm. Fred gasped in amazement. I've been wanting to learn that spell forever. George waved his hand in front of the empty space where Kyle had just stood but felt nothing. He's only a second year and he can already do that. What else is he hiding from us? Meanwhile, Kyle moved silently along the walls, his presence hidden as he carefully made his way to the door of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. He checked the quill he'd wedged in the crack of the door as a marker, relieved to see it was still intact. Good, it wasn't a basilisk. Whoever's there, come out. I can see you, came a voice from behind the door. A round head suddenly poked through the wood. It's me, Myrtle. Kyle removed the disillusionment charm, appearing in front of her. Oh, it's you, Kyle, Myrtle said with a broad smile. Have you finally decided to share a bathroom with me? Sorry, no plans for that yet, Kyle replied with a shake of his head. I just came to ask if anyone else has been around here lately. You? Myrtle asked with a disappointed pout. No, I mean anyone besides me. No one, Myrtle replied, her expression crumpling. No one ever comes here. Who would want to visit ugly, miserable, moaning Myrtle? They won't even stand near the door for a second. Kyle shifted awkwardly. Well, at least Peeves seems to like you. But this only made Myrtle wail louder, her mournful sobs echoing down the corridor. Kyle shivered as a chill ran down his spine. To avoid drawing attention, Kyle quickly changed the subject. By the way, how's the Peeves protection device I installed in your bathroom working out? I'm not sure. That horrid ghost hasn't been around lately, Myrtle replied, her mood shifting as quickly as a turned-off tap. She glanced back into the bathroom, a bit doubtful. But do you really think it works? Just setting a dozen books on the floor to scare away that pesky spirit? Of course. Kyle grinned. And those weren't just books, they were special fireworks. The moment Peeves opens the door, the entire castle will hear the noise, and he'll be scared off for good. Oh, all right, then, Myrtle said with a pout. Satisfied that whatever had happened in the castle wasn't basilisk-related, Kyle was ready to head back. He didn't want Professor Sprout realizing he'd slipped away. By the way, Myrtle called out wistfully, if you change your mind, you're welcome to move in here anytime. At that, Kyle's pace quickened as he hurried back toward the Hufflepuff common room entrance, where he nearly bumped into Professor Sprout, who was just coming out. Kyle, thank goodness you're safe, she said sternly, her expression severe. Where were you, and why didn't you come back with the others? Kyle had never seen Professor Sprout look so upset. Feeling sheepish, he tried to come up with an explanation. Professor, I was just a little worried, that's all, so I stayed outside a bit longer to see if I could help. As he struggled to find an excuse, Professor Sprout sighed and asked, who told you this, was it Minerva? Told me what? Kyle stammered, utterly confused by the question. Professor Sprout seemed to misinterpret his response, her tone softening. I know you're close to Hagrid, and of course you'd be concerned if you heard he'd been seriously injured. But you're only a second-year student, Kyle, and your priority is to keep yourself safe. Madame Pomfrey will take good care of Hagrid. Hagrid? He's hurt. Kyle blurted out, shocked. I'm sorry, Professor, could you tell me how he is now? Professor Sprout hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He'll be fine, she finally said. When we found him near the Forbidden Forest, there were signs of dark magic all over him. If he weren't so strong, he might not have survived. But don't worry, he's in the hospital wing now, receiving the best care. Thank you, Professor. I understand, Kyle replied. Could I go see him, then? Not right now. Professor Sprout's tone turned stern again. Until Professor Dumbledore returns from the Forbidden Forest, everyone is to remain in the common room. No exceptions. Yes, Professor, Kyle said, realizing she meant it. Now, off you go, back to the common room. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 203, Mars is very bright in the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore stood quietly amidst the ruins. His face was expressionless, a terrifying calm that seemed to chill the air. Dumbledore. Snape approached him, speaking in a low tone. The students have all returned to the castle. No one was hurt. Thank you, Severus, Dumbledore replied. Snape's eyes flashed with frustration. What on earth happened here? Apparently, someone was trying to use unicorn blood to extend their life. Dumbledore bent down, looking at the dying unicorn at his feet. If Hagrid hadn't found the other one in time, it would probably be dead as well. Yes, and now that big oaf is the one nearly dead, Snape sneered, disdain filling his voice. Was it really worth it, for just a beast? Dumbledore's gaze softened, though his voice held firm. Everyone has their convictions, Severus, and those convictions are not so easily measured by worthiness. Just as when you did it, for Lily. Dumbledore. Snape's voice rose in fury. Don't you ever mention that name again. He took a deep breath, struggling to regain his composure. After a long pause, he continued in a hard tone, do you know who it was that attacked Hagrid? I believe so. Dumbledore stepped forward, approaching a charred patch of earth. He bent down and ran his hand over the blackened ground. Fiend fire, such troublesome dark magic. If it had spread, I fear we might have lost the entire Forbidden Forest. He straightened and walked a few paces to the side, where two centaurs lay motionless, surrounded by chaotic footprints. The killing curse. Dumbledore murmured. Their quivers are half empty, it seems they weren't killed by the curse immediately. Whoever did this is very weak. Unicorn blood may prolong his life, but it cannot restore his strength. With each revelation, Snape's face grew darker. You said before, he doesn't dare kill anymore. Fear and inability are two very different things, Dumbledore replied calmly. It doesn't matter how many centaurs die, it won't affect Hogwarts, nor will Hagrid's fate. He knows the parents and governors don't care about them. As long as no students die, Hogwarts won't close, and he still has a chance at the Philosopher's Stone. That's just your speculation, Snape said coldly. Dumbledore nodded. You're right. None of us truly know his thoughts, which is why I've decided to temporarily halt the Quidditch matches. A tense silence fell between them, and then Snape, grasping at a slim hope, asked, what if it was Orin who returned? He, too, can cast fiend fire and the killing curse. From what I know, he's hiding in the north, avoiding the Aurors. He won't be back anytime soon. And if it were him, Hagrid would likely not have left the Forbidden Forest alive. Silence settled over them again until the muffled sound of hooves echoed from the distance. Keep an eye on him for me, will you? You know who I mean. Dumbledore said softly. Snape didn't respond. Without a word, he turned and left. The sound of hooves grew closer, and soon, a group of powerful centaurs, armed with bows and arrows, appeared around Dumbledore, their expressions fierce and watchful. Don't move. Mr. Dumbledore. The lead centaur quickly signaled the others to lower their weapons upon recognizing him. He approached, asking, why are you here, and what on earth is going on? As you can see, Megorian, Dumbledore replied, someone attempted to kill a unicorn, and Hagrid, along with two of your centaurs, were caught in the crossfire. Only then did Megorian notice the two fallen centaurs lying nearby. Suddenly, the sound of hooves surrounded them as more centaurs arrived. Megorian approached the fallen with a choked voice. Druji. Lyra, they were both brave warriors. Ronan, Firenze, he continued, take them back to the tribe. I think they would want to rest where the irises bloom. The two centaurs solemnly lifted their fallen comrades and left. When Megorian looked back at Dumbledore, his demeanor had steadied, and he spoke calmly. Dumbledore, Mars has been burning brightly, very brightly. Be prepared. This is only the beginning, and it is far from over. Dumbledore nodded slightly. Thank you for the warning, Megorian. I only wish to see no more centaurs lost in this tragic way. Megorian paused. Good luck to you, Mr. Dumbledore, and Mr. Scamander." With that, he and the other centaurs retreated into the forest. Dumbledore remained still, tilting his head slightly toward the injured unicorn. An elderly figure had appeared there at some point, gently stroking the unicorn's bruised body. A phoenix perched on his shoulder. "How is she?" Dumbledore asked. "Not well," Newt replied, looking up with concern. "She's lost a significant amount of blood, and dark magic has left her terribly weakened. But fortunately, we found her in time, her life isn't in danger." "That's a relief," Dumbledore said. "She protected Hagrid from 2 deadly curses. If she hadn't made it, I don't know how I would have broken the news to him." "No," Newt murmured, carefully feeding the unicorn a potion and applying another to her wounds. Under his calming influence, the once terrified unicorn gradually relaxed and fell asleep. Only then did Newt take out a suitcase and carefully place her inside. After they left the Forbidden Forest, the two returned to the headmaster's office. "Thank you for coming all the way here," Dumbledore said, half-jokingly, as he poured Newt a cup of black tea. "I really couldn't bear the thought of leaving the unicorns in Professor Kettleburn's care again. Hogwarts might need 2 new professors by next year." Newt chuckled, recalling how Professor Kettleburn had been gored by a unicorn the previous year. That professor could indeed be somewhat reckless. "Oh, and one more thing." Dumbledore's gaze lingered on the suitcase in Newt's hands. "Did you happen to give Kyle a suitcase like that?" Puff. Newt sputtered, accidentally spitting out his tea. True to his reputation, Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard, dodged in an instant, his long beard remaining unscathed. But Fawkes, perched behind him, was less fortunate. The entire splash of tea drenched him. "Don't get excited, I was merely asking," Dumbledore said with a wink. "I've been wondering about it since Halloween, but none of us have seen Kyle carrying a case around." "Well, maybe, he left it behind," Newt muttered, barely audible. Luckily, someone, well, some bird, came to his rescue. Fawkes, after a moment of bewilderment, shook himself dry, then, indignant, began pecking at Dumbledore's beard. "Hey, Fawkes, Newt's the one who sprayed the tea." Dumbledore protested, clearly not eager to take the blame. But Fawkes ignored him, focused solely on Dumbledore, who had failed to shield him from the tea. And Fawkes showed no mercy, snapping at tufts of silver-white beard with every peck. Dumbledore clutched his beard in pain, his voice betraying his discomfort. Taking advantage of the commotion, Newt quietly picked up his case and slipped out of the office unnoticed. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 204, Hagrid's self-blame. When Hogwarts returned to normal the next day, Kyle went straight to the hospital wing. Almost everyone was buzzing about the previous day's events, with rumors flying in every direction. A dark wizard attacked Hogwarts. The Death Eaters are making a comeback. Magical creatures are rebelling. The bastard son that Dumbledore abandoned is seeking revenge. The bastard son that Snape abandoned to seek justice. Kyle had only walked from the common room to the Great Hall and already overheard 5 or 6 different versions, each more outrageous than the last. Honestly, if Lockhart had just applied to Hogwarts a little sooner, he wouldn't have needed to wander around borrowing stories to write his books. When Kyle reached the courtyard, it was noticeably quieter. No one was in front of the hospital wing. With most students at the Quidditch match, Hagrid had been brought to the hospital wing without being seen by any of the young wizards. As a result, hardly anyone knew he had been attacked. Kyle knocked on the door, a bit apprehensive. He wasn't sure if Madame Pomfrey would let him in and had even prepared himself for the possibility of leaving without seeing Hagrid. But, to his surprise, Madame Pomfrey simply stepped aside and let him in without a word. "You'd better be able to cheer him up. There's no magic potion for depression," she said, leading Kyle to the far end of the room, where she pulled back the curtain around a hospital bed. Hagrid lay there, his eyes vacant. Kyle called his name several times, but Hagrid didn't respond. "Is it that serious?" Kyle frowned. "No," Madame Pomfrey shook her head. Last night, the headmaster sent over a special potion containing phoenix tears. Once he drank it, his injuries were nearly fully healed. So, what's wrong with him now? Kyle asked. That's just it, he's deeply depressed. This can't go on, Madame Pomfrey sighed. I'll leave you to it. I'll go prepare the elixir to induce euphoria, though I hope it won't come to that. After she left, Kyle tried calling Hagrid's name again, but it was no use. With no other options, he took a deep breath and shouted, "Wake up, Hagrid. 2 dragons are fighting over a nest of dragon eggs in the Forbidden Forest." This time, Hagrid finally stirred. His eyes shifted slightly as he mumbled, "No, don't fight, the dragon eggs'll break. You don't need to worry at all. There are no dragons at Hogwarts, and no dragon eggs either," Kyle said gently. Hagrid turned his head toward him, as if just now realizing Kyle was there. "Kyle, why are you here?" "Of course, I heard you were hurt and came to check on you." Kyle handed him a large box of chocolates. "Here, have some, it'll help." "I can't eat." Hagrid suddenly clutched his hair, his voice breaking as he wailed, "Drudgy. Lyra, they're gone, right in front of me. It's all my fault, too slow, too slow. If I'd just gotten there quicker, they'd still be alive." Hagrid's cries grew louder, his words eventually drowned out by his sobs. Kyle didn't interrupt, he didn't try to console him. He simply sat beside Hagrid in silence, unwrapping chocolate frogs one by one. Only when Hagrid's sobs finally subsided did Kyle speak softly. "I don't know how to make you feel better, Hagrid, but at least you saved the unicorn. Sella." Hagrid looked up, and for the first time, his face showed something other than sorrow. Is she okay?" "If you mean the unicorn, Sella, yes, she's alive." Kyle handed Hagrid a chocolate frog and watched him pop it into his mouth. "Newt Scamander was at Hogwarts yesterday. He's taken Sella for treatment, and she's expected to recover well enough to return to the Forbidden Forest by the end of the school year." "You really saw Mr. Scamander?" Hagrid's eyes widened. "You're not making this up?" "Of course not." Kyle nodded, absolutely certain. Newt had told him this himself when he'd managed to slip into the Hufflepuff common room the day before, so he knew it was true. There were just some things they couldn't tell Hagrid about that conversation. Kyle still couldn't figure it out, though. Not even Cedric or the Weasley twins knew about his suitcase, so how in the world did Dumbledore find out? Could it be Hermione? But that didn't make sense, she'd never even met Dumbledore. If anything, she would have gone to Professor McGonagall. Then it hit him, this is just like dealing with Tom Riddle. "That's wonderful, just wonderful." Hagrid began to cry again, though this time out of relief and happiness. "So, you see, the Forbidden Forest needs you, Hagrid," Kyle said, handing him the last chocolate frog. "And don't forget, you didn't catch the Dark Wizard this time. What if he comes back to the Forbidden Forest while you're away? Those unicorns wouldn't stand a chance." "Yeah, you're right," Hagrid said, rubbing his face and sitting up a bit. "I should get back there." "Not so fast," Kyle interjected, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, fist-sized sphere. "This is for you." "Thanks, Kyle, but I don't need any more chocolate." "You can keep it." "This isn't chocolate, it's a distress signal I made," Kyle explained. "Just crush the outer shell, and it'll send a special firework into the sky. As long as Dumbledore and the other professors are at Hogwarts, they'll see it and come right away." Hagrid took the small sphere and shook his head. "I won't use this." Hagrid felt that the deaths of the 2 centaurs had only been possible because he'd been caught off guard. If he met the Dark Wizard again, he was determined to strike with everything he'd eaten for breakfast, in any way he could manage. And if all else failed, he could always use the wand concealed in his pink umbrella to send up red sparks for help. But that wand was his secret, and no one else could know about it. "Keep it, Hagrid," Kyle insisted, pressing the sphere into Hagrid's hands. "Please, just to be safe." Think of it as doing it for the magical creatures. The sooner we catch that dark wizard, the sooner the Forbidden Forest can be peaceful again. Well, all right, Hagrid said after a moment's thought. So I just crush it? Exactly, Kyle confirmed. Hold on to it whenever you go into the Forbidden Forest, and just squeeze it if you need help. It's a lot easier than sending up a distress signal by yourself. Hagrid scratched his head and muttered, I don't have a wand. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 205, Hermione's Intuition. Amazing, Madame Pomfrey said, glancing at Hagrid, who had just asked to be discharged from the hospital. She turned to Kyle with a look of astonishment. She had only intended for Kyle to help lift Hagrid's spirits a bit, but she hadn't expected him to go this far. Hagrid had been so stubbornly resistant, refusing to listen to anyone even when he was on the verge of collapse. Now he was actually begging to be discharged. This was almost too good to be true. Poppy, is that all right? Hagrid asked again when Madame Pomfrey didn't respond. Someone has to guard the Forbidden Forest, and I need to get back there quickly. You may leave, but I need to check you over one more time, she said with a firm tone. Although she knew the potion Dumbledore had sent was extremely potent, and Hagrid's resilience meant he'd likely be fine even if he left immediately, she still needed to perform a final examination. It was a necessary procedure for everyone. Setting down the large wooden bucket she held, she turned to gather her tools for the checkup. You may not believe this, but I've always been a little scared of her, Hagrid murmured to Kyle. More than 10 years now. Every time I come here, my legs start shaking. I understand. Kyle replied with a knowing smile. When he was a child, even the magical creatures seemed wary whenever he helped Newt with their potions. Even now, years later, a Krupp would still bolt with its tail between its legs at the sight of him. Madame Pomfrey's inspection didn't take long and was soon completed. By the time they exited the hospital wing, it was nearly noon. Kyle invited Hagrid to join him in the Great Hall for lunch, but Hagrid declined. I need to get back and check on Fong, he said. He must be worried sick after all this time. They said their goodbyes in the courtyard, and Kyle headed back to the castle. However, upon returning, he noticed the usual chatter among the students had shifted. The young wizards weren't talking about yesterday's events anymore but rather about Quidditch. Due to what had happened yesterday, Ravenclaw and Slytherin were scheduled for a rematch today. What Kyle didn't expect was that the game had already ended while he was with Hagrid. Damn it, didn't they say the rematch was in the afternoon? Kyle muttered in disbelief. If he had known. Well, even if he had known, he would have still gone to see Hagrid first. Kyle, have you seen Hagrid? Harry suddenly appeared, rushing over with Hermione and Ron close behind. We went to his hut to look for him, but Professor Sprout was there instead, Harry explained. That was awful. Ron added, looking glum. She scolded us for going out there. You must know what happened with Hagrid, can you tell us? Hermione stepped forward, pushing Ron aside and fixing Kyle with a serious look. Why would you think that? Kyle asked. Because I noticed you weren't at the Quidditch match, Hermione replied, her gaze sharp. Harry told me that, as a team member, there's no way you would miss a match unless something really important came up. And since you skipped the match, it must have been something urgent. I think, it was probably about yesterday, something to do with Hagrid. Kyle pressed his lips together, impressed by Hermione's deductive skills. She had nearly pieced together the entire truth. Then there were the other two. Harry was nodding enthusiastically, while Ron simply looked bewildered, as though he hadn't understood a word. The difference was staggering. How had the three of them ended up as friends? Hagrid. He's fine, you're worrying for nothing, Kyle interrupted Hermione. Actually, I always thought the match was in the afternoon, that's why I didn't go to watch it. Besides, Hagrid and I were in the hospital wing all morning, helping Madame Pomfrey with a small task. Professor Sprout was only covering for him in the Forbidden Forest for a short while. No, if anyone were helping, it would have been Filch, Hermione said, narrowing her eyes in suspicion. How could a professor find time to go to the Forbidden Forest? And Professor Sprout is the head of Hufflepuff, so she must be even busier. I don't know. Maybe she just happened to be passing by and offered to help. Kyle shrugged. Or you could ask Hagrid. He should be back at his hut by now. Sometimes, being too smart could be annoying. It was easier with Harry and Ron, they simply believed everything he said and saved him a lot of trouble. Hagrid's back. Hermione looked surprised, this wasn't what she'd expected. She had assumed Hagrid was seriously injured and would be stuck in the hospital wing, but if that were true, Madame Pomfrey wouldn't have let him go so soon. Yes, he just went back, Kyle confirmed. By the way, how did the match turn out? Ravenclaw won. Harry burst out excitedly, his eyes gleaming. Their seeker was amazing. She caught the golden snitch when Ravenclaw was 100 points behind. Too bad you missed it, Ron added, grinning. The looks on the Slytherins' faces were priceless. They actually lost to the weakest team, and Malfoy's face turned green. Well, I can picture it, Kyle said with a chuckle. After a bit more chat, Harry grabbed Ron and they headed out of the castle to find Hagrid. But Hermione didn't leave. She continued to walk alongside Kyle, her eyes sweeping him up and down with a peculiar look. Aren't you worried Hagrid might say something? Hermione suddenly asked. She had a strong hunch Kyle hadn't been entirely truthful. What's there to be worried about? We really were just helping, Kyle replied, keeping his tone casual. As long as he made sure his own story checked out, whatever Hagrid said was out of his hands. Besides, he couldn't keep Harry from going to see Hagrid forever. Hermione frowned, continuing to scrutinize him. Harry and Ron have been gone for a while now. Aren't you going to join them? Kyle said, shifting uncomfortably under her gaze. Hoping to distract her, he pulled a handful of chocolate frog cards from his pocket and handed them over. By the way, since Harry was nice enough to tell me the match results, could you give him these too? I remember he was collecting the cards. Just as Hermione was about to reply, her gaze caught a line of text on the top card. And his partner Nicholas Flamel have achieved great things in the field of alchemy. Nicholas Flamel, alchemy. I know who Nicholas Flamel is. Hermione suddenly shouted, leaping to her feet and sprinting upstairs toward the Gryffindor common room. Kyle watched her dash off, then glanced down at the stack of cards still in his hand and slipped them back into his pocket. Thank Dumbledore, he thought with relief, Hermione had finally been sent off. Now the fun in this clip is over. Which listeners haven't liked and commented yet? You can press like and comment to encourage the admin find the fun in the next clip. May the listeners be happy forever.